The little girl was standing alone in the pouring rain, soaking wet, her tiny shoes sinking into the mud at the edge of the park, and she wasn't crying. And that was the part that broke Marcus Cole's heart completely. Children who are lost cry. Children who have been alone long enough to give up on being found just stand there, staring at nothing, their silence louder than any scream could ever be. Marcus had been heading home from another 12-hour shift at the auto repair shop, still wearing his grease-stained jacket, still carrying the weight of bills he couldn't pay and a mortgage 3 months behind. He was 34 years old, raising his 7-year-old son Eli alone after his wife had passed 2 years earlier, and some days the exhaustion sat so deep in his bones that he wasn't sure he could keep going. That evening, he almost didn't stop. He told himself someone else would handle it. He told himself he was too tired. But then the little girl turned her head, and her eyes found his, pale gray eyes, wide and ancient-looking for someone so small, and Marcus Cole forgot every excuse he had ever made for himself. He pulled over immediately. Before we go any further, if you believe in kindness and the power of one good person changing everything, please take a second right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear a story like this today. Drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from, and subscribe to the Kindness channel. Every single one of you who finds this channel is here for a reason. Now let's get back to Marcus and the little girl who was about to change his life forever. He approached her slowly, the way you approach something fragile, something that has already been hurt once and might shatter if startled. She was maybe 5 or 6 years old, wearing a white dress that was now completely drenched and stained with mud along the hem, her dark hair plastered to her small face. She had no shoes on her right foot, just a sock, soaked through and gray with dirt. Marcus crouched down to her level, and in the gentlest voice he had, the same voice he used when Eli had nightmares, he asked her if she was okay and if she knew where her parents were. The little girl looked at him for a long moment, then slowly shook her head. That was all. Just that small, devastating shake of the head. Marcus took off his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders without thinking. It swallowed her whole. He called the police immediately, reported the child, gave his location, and then he did something that probably wasn't in any rule book but felt absolutely necessary. He picked her up, carried her to his truck, turned the heat all the way up, and drove to the nearest diner because she was shivering so hard her teeth were clicking together. He bought her hot chocolate and a grilled cheese sandwich, and he sat across from her in the booth and talked to her softly about nothing. About his son Eli, about the dog they didn't have but Eli desperately wanted, about how the rain always made the earthworms come out, and how that was actually pretty amazing if you thought about it. And somewhere between the hot chocolate and the story about the earthworms, the little girl smiled. It was small and uncertain, like she'd forgotten she knew how, but it was there. She told him her name was Sophia. She didn't know her last name. She didn't know her address. She knew her mother had long hair and smelled like flowers, and that they had a very big house, and that she had gotten separated near a fountain. That was everything. Marcus relayed it all to the police officer who arrived 20 minutes later, and when the officer suggested taking Sophia to the station, the little girl grabbed Marcus's sleeve with both hands and held on with a strength that seemed impossible for someone so tiny. The officer, reading the situation with quiet wisdom, agreed to let Marcus bring her to the station himself and wait with her. So that is what he did. He called his neighbor Mrs. Patterson to stay with Eli. He sat in a plastic chair at the police station for 3 hours with Sophia asleep against his arm, her breathing finally slow and even, her small hand still loosely holding a fold of his shirt even in sleep. Marcus didn't move. He barely breathed. He thought about his wife, about how she used to say that God puts people in front of you for a reason, and that the only question is whether you're paying enough attention to see them. He thought he finally understood what she meant. It was nearly 10 o'clock at night when the doors of the police station flew open. The woman who walked in seemed to alter the air pressure in the entire room. She was tall, impeccably dressed despite the hour, with dark hair swept back from a face that was simultaneously beautiful and devastated, red-eyed from crying, mascara gone, and yet still radiating something that Marcus could only describe as power. She was followed by 2 men in suits and a police escort, and she was already calling Sophia's name before she had fully entered the building. The little girl jerked awake at the sound of her mother's voice and burst into the tears she had never cried in the rain, and the woman dropped to her knees on the station floor without any regard for her clothing or her dignity, and pulled her daughter into her arms and held her like she was holding the entire world together with that single embrace. Her name, Marcus would learn in the next few stunned minutes, was Vivienne Archer, as in Archer Global Holdings, as in one of the wealthiest women in the country, as in the woman whose face appeared on the covers of financial magazines and whose name was attached to foundations and skyscrapers and charitable initiatives in 7 countries. Marcus recognized her then, the vague, half-remembered recognition of someone you've seen in headlines without ever expecting to encounter in real life. He stood up quietly, intending to slip away, feeling suddenly very aware of his grease-stained shirt and the fact that he had nothing remarkable about him whatsoever. But Vivienne Archer looked up from where she was still kneeling on the floor, holding Sophia, and she looked directly at him. And then the officer explained what Marcus had done, how he had stopped in the rain, wrapped the child in his jacket, bought her dinner, stayed with her for hours, never left her side. Vivienne stood up slowly. Her expression was something Marcus couldn't quite name. It wasn't just gratitude. It was something heavier and more complicated than gratitude, and it frightened him slightly, which is when she spoke the words that would unravel the next hour completely. She said that she needed to tell him something. She said that she needed him to sit back down. The terrifying truth was this: Sophia had not simply wandered away. Sophia had been taken. There had been an attempted kidnapping that afternoon near the fountain. A coordinated professional attempt by people who had been watching their movements for weeks, people connected to a business rival who had threatened Vivienne's family before. Sophia had somehow broken free and run, and the men had lost her in the crowd in the rain, and for 6 hours Vivienne had not known whether her daughter was alive. The police had been involved, a private security team had been deployed. And while all of that was happening, a tired, broke, grease-stained auto mechanic with a son at home and a truck that burned oil had simply stopped because a little girl's silence was louder than everything else in his world. The men who had orchestrated the attempt had been apprehended an hour earlier, partly because of the location information Marcus had unknowingly provided when he called 911. It had given police a trail to track backward toward the fountain, toward the men who had been waiting nearby. Marcus had not only saved Sophia, he had helped bring her captors in without even knowing it. Vivienne Archer, who had negotiated billion-dollar deals without flinching, stood in a police station and wept. Not performatively, not gracefully, the way real people cry when something that was almost lost is suddenly, miraculously returned to them whole. She asked Marcus what she could do. She used words like anything and everything, and Marcus, who was the kind of man who fixed things with his hands and drove a truck with a cracked dashboard and coached Eli's Little League team on Saturday mornings, told her honestly and quietly that he didn't need anything, that he had only done what any decent person would do, that he was just glad Sophia was safe. Vivienne looked at him for a long time after he said that, the way people look at something they weren't sure still existed in the world. She didn't accept his refusal entirely. Over the following weeks, without fanfare or announcement, things began to quietly change for Marcus Cole. The mortgage caught up in a way his bank couldn't fully explain. Eli's school tuition, for the private school Marcus had always dreamed of sending him to but never could afford, was anonymously covered for the next 10 years. Marcus's repair shop received a long-term fleet contract from a company he'd never heard of, enough to hire 2 more people and finally stop drowning. He never had proof it was her. He never asked. Some gifts are delivered in silence, because the giver understands that a man like Marcus would never accept them any other way. But the thing that stayed with him most wasn't any of that. It was a letter that arrived, 6 weeks later, written in a child's handwriting, with backward letters and a drawing of a man and a little girl standing in the rain. At the bottom, in that careful, crooked script, Sophia had written, "You stopped. Thank you for stopping." Marcus framed it. He hung it in the shop, right next to a photo of his wife. Because she had been right. God does put people in front of you. The only question is whether you're paying attention. And on a rainy Tuesday evening, a tired man in a grease-stained jacket had looked up at exactly the right moment, and everything changed, for both of them. If this story moved something in you today, if it reminded you that ordinary people do extraordinary things every single day just by choosing to stop and care, please give this video a like, share it with someone who needs to believe in goodness right now, and leave a comment below. Your support means everything to this channel and helps these stories reach more hearts around the world. And before you go, we want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell us, if you had been in Marcus's place that rainy evening, would you have stopped? We truly want to know. Thank you for watching kindness. Keep being the person who stops.